Well, good morning, ChurchOne. It's great to see you. One of the things that I'm always interested in hearing from people is them describing their faith journeys. And I think that metaphor of journey is really a good thing. A journey is really something where you leave, and in leaving and heading somewhere else, you're not just on a trip, you're genuinely creating life change. I can remember when we flew over to Korea to get Matt and China to get Macy, that those felt like more than just trips. They felt like journeys because we were leaving, and when we came back, we were different because we had kind of gone on this journey. And I think that's often a great metaphor for our spiritual lives, that very often our spiritual lives feel like a journey, like God calls us out and we begin to follow, and in that process of following, we experience real life change. And so I love to kind of ask people to describe a little bit of their faith journeys. And just this week, I was leading a group at a local company, and I just asked a few people, hey, could you just describe your faith journey? And I was like, I know it's kind of a vulnerable thing to do here at a work setting, but several people chimed in, and it was really interesting to hear them talk about it. One of them mentioned the fact that he grew up in a real conservative kind of Christian home, and he remembers going to church all the time and all that, but his faith was not his own. And it took going away to college and sort of rebelling a little bit, and then beginning to own his faith for himself when he was graduating and becoming an adult, and that transition really was a part of his journey. Another person said that for 27 years of their lives, they never even went to church. They didn't do church at all. They were a good, decent, moral person, but church just was not a part of their lives. And then someone invited them to church, and they began to go, and then they began to hear the message, and they realized that this is what they had been missing their whole life. And they had a particular service where people could come forward and ask Jesus into their lives, and sure enough, she did, and she surprised everyone because they didn't think that she was at that place or needed that. But she said for her, like, that was a profound part of her spiritual journey. And still another described his journey as sort of growing up, went to church at Christmas and Easter, and it was just sort of in his life, but it wasn't much of his life, and he didn't really think about God all that much. And then as a high schooler, he got invited to Young Life and started attending Young Life, and that began to raise some questions for him. And then he went on a Young Life camp one summer, his senior year, and sitting out there on the lawn by himself at a time of reflection in the Young Life camp, he basically said, God, if you're real, I need you to show yourself to me. And sure enough, in God's unique way, God did, and his life began to change. It's so fascinating to me, the different kind of journeys we all go on and how they all look different. These were just 3 of them. I mean, there could be more. As many of us that are listening to this right now, like, we all have different journeys that we're on. I wonder if you've thought much about your journey or where you are in your journey. Are you starting? Have you been on it for a while? Where are you in your journey? Thinking about faith journeys, again, I find it fascinating and interesting, and I think it's a cool thing to do, and I think it's a biblical thing to do. And as we come into what we call Epiphany Sunday, and actually this next few weeks is going to be a season of Epiphany in the church, and Epiphany is really the story of the wise men kind of making their journey to Jesus. There's more to the story than that, and we'll get at that in a little while. But for today's purposes, I think that I would love for us to just sort of center ourselves on this idea of, like, faith journeys. And we're going to look at the faith journey of the wise men. And I'm not going to say that this is what every faith journey should look like or anything like that, but what I do think is, I think as we look at their journey, I think there might be a principle that would be just good for us to ponder and think about our own journeys or the journeys that others are on. So I'm going to read it, and then we'll pray, and then we'll jump into it. And so we find the story of the wise men in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. And I'm going to go ahead and read that. And I'm reading from the NRSV. It says, in the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage. When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage. When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, when they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Let me pray. Lord, we thank you that you call us to yourself, and we follow that call. And that you are, in fact, asking us to go on a journey. And I pray as we reflect on this ancient journey, that it would speak to our hearts, that it would call us to come and follow you and to know you. Lord, may you open up our hearts to receive your word. And I ask this for your sake and for your glory, Jesus. Amen. And so the journey of the wise men, right? I know you're probably like, well, isn't that a Christmas story? It actually is a post-Christmas story. The reality is that the wise men probably could have come as much as 2 years after the birth of Jesus. And the star they saw, when they saw the star, all that kind of stuff may or may not have been around Christmas. And there may or may not have been 3 wise men. They guess there's 3 because of the 3 gifts, but there could have been a lot more. These wise men were astrologers. They studied both the movements of the stars in the heaven, but then tried to discern and understand things. They most likely came from Babylon and Persia, 2 nations that had earlier conquered and deported a lot of Israelites. And they may have had a minor knowledge of the Jewish scriptures. And so what they saw in the stars in the sky and what they had heard about a coming Messiah from the Jews, maybe those 2 things connected with them and they sort of brought them there. But the reality, and for today's purposes, I just want you to think about the fact that they went on a journey, and I want you to stop and think about what was it that led them on this journey? And here it was. It was a star. That was it. A star. They looked and they saw a star. Maybe they studied the stars, but this star was the very thing that sort of prompted them to go on the journey. Now, there's great debate about the nature of the star. Was it a natural phenomenon that happened every once in a while in the heavens, and they noticed and saw something and deduced things as astrologers and astronomers? Or was the star, in fact, a supernatural miracle, a supernatural phenomenon that happened, that God sent to be a sign? If you're asking me which way I go, I'll probably lean towards the supernatural phenomenon. But, either one, I think, holds water, because for our purposes today, what it was, whether God created it supernaturally or whether it was a naturally occurring phenomenon, what they witnessed was a star. And here's the deal. Whatever you think, was it natural, supernatural, here's the thing I bet we can be assured of. I bet the star was beautiful. I bet it was beautiful. I don't know when the last time you had the opportunity to kind of get outside of the city and be somewhere in a more rural setting where the city lights don't drown out the stars, and you look up in the heavens and you see the stars. I mean, there's still something amazingly beautiful about the stars in the sky. Still something that kind of stirs your hearts. And I'm sure there was a beauty and a wonder, right? A beauty and a wonder that tapped into something inside of these wise men and made them go on their journey. Here's where I want you to think about this for a second. When we talk about spiritual journeys and embarking on spiritual journeys, I want you to stop and think about the importance of beauty and wonder to lead you on your journey. Just like this beautiful star led these wise men, I would argue, and I don't think I'm alone, that beauty and wonder often are the things that pull us towards God. Bishop Robert Barron makes the observation that beauty holds the power to overcome our hearts. It is beauty that can force an opposing heart to surrender. Why is that? Well, beauty grabs us, our intuition. I'm not talking about just physical beauty. I'm talking about like beauty and wonder of nature. There's something about it that just grabs your heart, right? And it kind of captures your intuition. You feel like you're a part of something. I don't know what you kind of naturally think about. I think about sometimes when I've skied and I've been up at the top of a mountain out west and it's a clear day and I look and I see the mountains and the snow and all of this stuff and I realize I'm connected to something so much bigger than me. And it just sort of taps into not just a series of logical syllogisms like I'm on a mountain, this is a mountain, da da da. No, there's something in my heart that is captured and drawn. And beauty and wonder have a way of doing that. And it can be something as majestic as a mountain or a star. It can be something as simple as a little child. But something sort of captures your heart. And it leads you to something deeper. And that's what was happening to these wise men. They were prompted on this journey because beauty had touched their heart. Someone said the beautiful claims the viewer. It changes them and sends them on a mission. You know, we often don't think of a spiritual journey starting with beauty and wonder, but I would argue it is often difficult to move towards Jesus unless for some reason you see the beauty in Him. For some reason you recognize that there is a good God in the universe that's loving, merciful, true, kind, just, powerful, and that is beautiful to you and that draws you. Some part of that has to sort of propel you on your spiritual quest. And I would argue that being captured by the beauty of God is one of the things that our culture is crying out for. Listen, we're at a place where we have access to so much information. And I think for the most part, one of the hardest things that we struggle with in our society, whether you watch our reaction to COVID, politics, all this stuff, is that we assume that information now comes with an agenda. And so we resist information. And I'm not against reason and logic and all that stuff. I think it matters. But I think when we come at people with like reason and logic about faith, they just assume we have an agenda and they push it away. But man, when the beauty of God, when the goodness of God, when something about God is drawing them, that's a different story. That's a different story. And I think that's, why do I think that was true of the wise men? Well, here's what I say. The only sentence that we have of them speaking in the entire biblical narrative is when they get to King Herod and they say, where's the one born king of the Jews? Which we're going to talk about later. It was a bad idea to say to King Herod. But when they asked that, they said, we want to go worship him. They didn't want to just find him to like get in his court or whatever. They were like, we long to worship. We long to ascribe value, to pay homage to realize that He is bigger than us, bigger, more beautiful, more bold, more good. And we long to find Him and do this. You know, I read a testimony of a guy in a magazine called First Things. I can't even remember the guy's testimony. But he was a really intelligent guy, grew up as an atheist, and he said his atheism wasn't this hard, fast, like logical conviction. It was just something he used to fight with his Christian friends all the time. But he just sort of grew up. He was very secular. He grew up, he got, was kind of an environmentalist, got caught up in all of that kind of movement. And then he began to like delve into Eastern religion and all that to kind of fill this vacuum in his heart. But he said after a certain point, he found himself like longing for something. And he said what he longed for was someone to worship. Someone beautiful, good, true, that was bigger than him. Someone that he could pay homage to realize that he owed his life to this person. And that longing for worship led him ultimately to become a Christian of the Greek Orthodox variety, because that to him had the mystery and wonder that he longed for. But he became a Christian out of this journey to want to worship. And I would argue that this is like Bishop Barron talks about, that oftentimes beauty is the tip of the arrow that brings in the rest of the truth of the gospel to people's hearts. And it is this longing to wonder that I think is out there. I think it's out there. I think it's in you. I think it's in me. And I just would leave you with this, like, what is beautiful about Jesus to you? I know there's all sorts of questions. There's all sorts of things that you wrestle with and wonder about. But is Jesus beautiful to you? Is he beautiful to you? Is he beautiful enough to call you towards himself, to make you look for him? What's in your heart? What is your heart longing for? I would argue the longings of your heart are the things that are pulling you. This isn't certainly a universal starting point. In no way am I saying that this is the starting or stopping point of everybody's journey. I'm just sort of making a case for this. Their story was a story of beauty and wonder and worship, and that is what dragged them from the East, from the Babylon and Persia and other religions, and led them to the stable to find Jesus. Again, Bishop Barron talks about it like this. He says, picture this, like picture trying to kind of introduce a young child to baseball. Probably the worst thing that you could do if you wanted to introduce a young child to baseball is to sit them down and read them the rules of the game. Or like make them do incessant, boring drills, fundamentals like bend down and get grounder, hit 100 grounders to them. Not that the rules of baseball don't matter, not that the skills of baseball don't matter, but really the way to introduce a young child to baseball is to introduce them with wonder. Like take them to a game. Let them see the green grass and all this kind of stuff. Let them have popcorn. Let them hear the crowd. Let them watch it. Let them just experience a little of the beauty and wonder. And then let them play. Let them just start playing the game so that they're like, hey, not only is this like beautiful, but I kind of want to participate. Let them play. And then after they see the wonder and they want to participate, then they'll learn to understand the game and they'll do the things that they want to, if that's what captures their heart. And I think that that's a lot of times the way life works, right? We get introduced to the beauty and the wonder, and then you say, I want to participate in that. And then as you participate, you learn more and you grow more. And so I often think for people, like, introduce people to the wonder of Jesus, and then let them just participate. Let them come to church or a Bible study or something and experience like the goodness and the joy and the love and all that kind of stuff. And then they'll begin to want to understand. I really think there's something to this, and I think this is the way a lot of spiritual journeys happen. It's interesting. I was thinking about baseball, and I got to be honest. As I was thinking that analogy, I can remember my dad taking me to a game and just being caught up in the wonder of like, wow, like look at like coming out of Memorial Stadium and seeing the grass and all that stuff is so vivid. And then I remember just playing wiffle ball for hours in my backyard with my brother. Like none of us were any good, and I happened to be a lousy baseball player, so I never like grew on to embrace the game. But like the love of baseball, but all that helped me understand baseball, and I'm a fan of baseball to this day. But I've kind of soured on it because frankly the Orioles have been so bad for like it's been frustrating to be an Orioles fan. But this past summer, like I hadn't been to a game in years, and I had an invitation to go to a game, and I had front row seats, and I was on the field, and I was like back in the stadium. I'm like, oh yeah, Like, I like baseball. But it was like being reintroduced to that wonder again that I needed. And I wonder for you, do you need to be reintroduced to the wonder of all this stuff? Do you need to just let your heart be soaked into the beauty of it all? You know, it's interesting to stop and think about this, but like, you know, we're in a time and age where church is not a thing, right? Like, we were already struggling before, and then we've got COVID, we've got political divides in our culture. Like, church is a hard sell. And like, what are we to do? Like, what's our strategy going to be? Here's a thought. Let's try and make it beautiful. Now, I'm not just talking about artistic beauty, although I think artistic beauty is a wonderful thing. I think Shannon might move a lot more hearts than I do. You know, so I'm all for artistic beauty, but if you're not artistic like me, that doesn't mean you can't make this a beautiful place. You know, I was thinking about like this is a beautiful place when it's multi-generational. Like I get a chance. I don't have little kids or grandkids anymore, but you know, I've gotten a chance to know some little kids serving in the nursery, and they know my name, and it's fun to be multi-generational, to know people that are older, younger, my season. Like, that's a beautiful thing. I don't get that a lot, especially outside of my family, you know. I feel like this is a beautiful place where I can feel known and supported. I love this fall doing Godspeed as a group, and people just opened up and shared their stories, and it was a sacred time, and it was beautiful. Like, it was wonderful. This is a place to serve, you know. Because of ChurchOne, we've done stuff like First Fruit Farms and all that kind of stuff, and like just getting in touch with the beauty of serving and helping people and fixing an apartment for a refugee. Like, all that kind of stuff it's beautiful, right? It's really beautiful, and it's a place to worship. You know, like we get to like worship the true God. Like that's a beautiful thing. And I'm telling you, it works. You know, just Christmas Eve. Like I went with Ann. We've got this amazing neighbor. She actually like volunteers to wrap all of our Christmas presents for us. I know. We're spoiled, and I'm not going to tell you who she is because you're not going to know. But her kids are gone. She misses wrapping presents, so she wraps all of our Christmas presents for them. So every Christmas Eve, we give her a gift. And you know, this year, Ann bought the Huns Honey gift that Debbie Foreman and Sarah Batley had organized. And it was so awesome as she opened up the gift, and I heard Ann explain to her, like, oh, this is where this honey came from. These are the people that are making it. And it was a beautiful little gift. And you know what? For the first time, like, our neighbor came with us to church on Christmas Eve. And I think it might have been something as simple as that Huns Honey and her friendship with Ann and her sense of like, man, I want a little bit more, you know? And so there she was, Christmas Eve. And you know what I think drew her? Beauty. Beauty. Like, we can continue. We're doing a good job. We can keep getting better. We can make this a beautiful place. I know I talked about last year, like the big challenge, like make this a good place to be. Well, I think we make this a good place when we make it a beautiful place. Now, I often think about this. I'm going to kind of leave with this. I mean, you can probably tell I'm kind of jacked by this. Not just jacked by the idea of beauty, but jacked by the idea of building something good. I often wonder, 30 years from now, if I'm around and people ask, like, what were you doing, like, in a pandemic? Like, what was that like? 2 years of, like, struggling with this virus. And hopefully I'll, be okay and all that, and I'm not going to undermine all the suffering that's gone on and all that. But it'll be kind of cool to be like, you know what I did? Like, I helped build a beautiful place. It's called a church. Like, right smack dab in the middle of this thing. Like, we had kind of started a church a few years earlier, and like, we continued to we continued to find ways to gather virtually outside and inside safely. Then, like, we continued to fight to be a beautiful place and a community, and we fought and we survived and we thrived and we helped build something beautiful. Like, we're doing that, ChurchOne. We get to do that. It's an awesome call. It's a beautiful thing. And if we build something beautiful, I think we'll impact the world. I'm going to stop there. Because one of the things I've learned is that when it comes to beauty, sometimes less is more. And I think, I just love for you to stop and think about it. I'd love for you to stop and ponder, like, is the beauty and wonder of God, like, is it drawing you forward? Is it helping you move and change you and grow you? Why? Why not? What would it look like if God were more beautiful to you? What can you do to make God more beautiful to those around you? Because the truth is, you're not the only one on a journey. There's lots of people on a journey, and they want to find a beautiful place. And what would it look like for us to continue to make this a place of beauty? Now, if you're kind of there and you're like, well, yeah, but it's not that easy, it's not that simple, there's more to the story, you're right. We're going to come back next week. We're going to continue on. We're going to look at kind of the dark side of the story, the struggle, right? The King Herod and the opposition and all that. And we're going to talk about that. But for today, like, make it beautiful. Make it beautiful. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, thank you for calling us to be a church. Thank you for taking all of us on a journey to be a part of this community for whatever time we're here. Lord, I beg and I pray that you would show us how to make ChurchOne a beautiful place. And not a beautiful place because we're trying to hide something, a beautiful place because, Lord, you dwell in our midst and you're beautiful. So Jesus, would you dwell in our midst in such a way that your beauty captures hearts in this community. Show us how to be your church right here, right now. We ask this all in your name. Amen. God bless you. See you next week.